I used to believe that if I loved my child enough, he'd eventually become a grateful man. I thought patience, sacrifice, and endless forgiveness would mold his character into something good. But I never imagined that the very boy I raised with my own hands would one day see me as a liability. Not only that he would fake a pregnancy, manipulate my emotions, and plot my murder, all for money. All while smiling like the son I thought I knew. The transfer had just gone through $330,000 straight into Mason Hart's account. I called him as usual, trying to keep my voice warm, motherly, the way it had always been. Make sure to get some good supplements for Alyssa, I said. Take care of her and the baby. Mason chuckled casually like we were just having a pleasant Sunday call. Of course, Mom, he replied, I'm gonna be a dad now. I opened my mouth to say more, maybe something soft like I love you, when he cut me off. All right, Mom, gotta run. Lots going on. There wasn't even a hint of gratitude in his voice, not a single thank you after I drained my account for him. I swallowed the flicker of disappointment and responded gently, okay then, love you, sweetheart. But just as I went to hang up, I heard a voice that turned my blood cold. Finally, the old woman sent the money, said a woman, Elisa. I froze, my hand tightening on the phone, breath stuck in my chest. I waited, praying Mason would correct her or say something kind, but all I heard was him scoff. She's too damn cautious. We had to fake a pregnancy just to get that money. My heart stopped beating the way it used to. Every warm memory I had of my son shattered like thin glass. The bedtime stories, the scraped knees I kissed, the college tuition I paid in full, none of it mattered. He had always been reckless, always needed handouts, always promised to change. And I always believed him, but this time was different. This time he used love as bait. Before the wedding, Mason had constantly asked for help rent, cars, debts, gambling losses. I gave and gave, thinking he'd grow out of it. He said Alyssa was pregnant, and I believed him like a fool. I thought it was finally time for him to become a man. Now I saw clearly it was a performance, a scam played perfectly. And I had funded every act. 2 days later, Mason and Alyssa showed up at my doorstep unannounced. His arms were full of vitamin supplements, and he smiled like the devoted son everyone expected him to be. Just thought I'd check in, he said. Brought you something to help with your health. Alyssa chimed in, her voice honeyed and rehearsed. Emma, you have no idea how much Mason talks about you at home. I forced a smile and waved them inside. The show was on, and I was the only one in the audience who knew the script. I watched them move around my living room like actors setting a stage. It didn't take long before Mason launched into the real reason they came. You know, with the baby coming in our apartment being so cramped, we thought maybe we could move in for a while. Alyssa followed with a gentle sigh, placing a hand over her stomach. It's not ideal for a pregnant woman, and we'd be so grateful. I nodded like I'd been waiting to hear this. Of course you can, Mason's eyes lit up. But I noticed a flicker of calculation in his smile. He hesitated, then pushed further. Since we'll be staying here, maybe it makes sense to put the house in my name just for paperwork stuff, taxes, you know? Alyssa jumped in, voice dripping with sugary manipulation. You've done so much, Emma. You should be relaxing, not worrying about bills. I looked at them both and gave the softest smile. Sure, the word left my lips like a velvet curtain falling on Act 1. Their eyes widened slightly, surprised it was that easy. They didn't realize I wasn't surrendering. I was baiting. I wanted to see just how far they were willing to take this act. The very next morning, Elisa made breakfast fluffy pancakes, scrambled eggs, fresh orange ice. Mason cleaned the kitchen, humming like a man content with life. It was all fake, of course, a rehearsed routine to win me over while they waited for legal control. But I played along, even complimented the food. You've really outdone yourselves, I said sweetly. Inside, I was memorizing their every move. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thoughts spiraling like smoke. Had I been too harsh? Too suspicious? Was I losing my mind? Then I heard the whispers again, low voices coming from the living room. I crept toward the door and leaned in. What I heard confirmed everything. As soon as she signs the house over, Mason whispered, we kick her out. Alyssa giggled softly. Exactly. Then all her inheritance is ours anyway. She's got no one else. Mason scoffed, she doesn't mean a damn thing to me. I've got you now. What do I need her for? I stood in the hallway, paralyzed. I had given my life to him, my son, my boy. I'd sacrificed everything, hoping love would be enough. But all I ever did was teach him how to take without giving. He didn't see me as a mother. He saw me as a transaction. I wanted to scream, to cry, to tear the whole charade down. But I didn't. I went back to my room and sat in the dark, trembling. A part of me still wanted to believe it wasn't true, but when morning came and Goofy wasn't waiting by my bed, I knew it was. Goofy had been my dog for 12 years, my only true companion. He'd never missed a morning without curling up beside me. I searched the entire house, backyard, street, nothing. His water bowl was full, but his bed was empty. Panic was crawling up my spine. At breakfast, I finally asked, Mason, have you seen Goofy? He didn't even look up from his plate. Oh, the dog. I took him out this morning and dropped him off somewhere. I froze. You what? I whispered, my voice cracking like a dry branch. He shrugged like it meant nothing. He was old, always getting in the way. The house is quieter now. My stomach twisted violently. Alyssa added calmly, honestly, Emma, you should be thanking him. He did the right thing. I stared at them, my blood, my family, and realized I was standing in a room full of strangers. My gaze fell on the photo on the coffee table, me, years ago, holding a tiny Goofy in my arms. That photo used to bring me joy. Now it burned. I felt something inside me die. And something else awaken. This had gone far enough. I'd always believed a mother's love could heal anything. But this wasn't something love could fix. This was betrayal with a smile. And they were about to learn who I really was. I didn't cry. Not that morning, not even when I saw Goofy's empty bed, stripped of all warmth, like his life had never mattered. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table across from Mason and Elisa and smiled. You two must be hungry, I said softly, masking the fire burning beneath my skin. I'll make something nice tonight, your favorites. Alyssa beamed, completely unaware that I had just crossed an invisible threshold inside myself. That evening, while they lounged on the couch watching TV, I locked myself in the bathroom and opened the drawer where I kept old prescription bottles. Over the past few weeks, I'd noticed some sedatives missing from my emergency stash. At first, I thought I'd misplaced them, but now I understood they'd been collecting them, maybe planning to use them on me. I crushed what remained of the pills into a fine powder and hid it away. I had no use for panic anymore, only precision. The next morning, while cleaning the living room, I noticed Mason's laptop sitting open on the couch. I wasn't trying to snoop, but a browser tab caught my eye and made my heart seize. How to file a high-value life insurance policy for a family member, it read. My vision blurred, hands shaking as I scrolled. Other tabs included things like untraceable ways to go missing and how to claim insurance after accidental death. I stopped reading after that. I had seen enough. I didn't scream or confront them. I didn't storm into the kitchen or call the police. I simply grabbed my coat and drove straight to my insurance provider. My heart pounded as I spoke to the front desk attendant. Hi, I'd like to check if there's a life insurance policy under my name. The woman tapped a few keys on her computer, paused, then nodded. Yes, Miss Emma Hart, you're listed under a premium tier plan, one of our most expensive packages. I left the office with a printed copy of the documents, my fingers frozen, mind racing. Mason had truly done it. He'd put a price on my life. Everything was right there, my signature forged, beneficiaries listed, payout process ready to initiate. If I died, Alyssa and Mason would be instant millionaires. That moment, I stopped being his mother in my heart. I became something else, a loose end he needed to tie up. When I returned home, they were already waiting for me with fake smiles. Mason stood up and took my bag like the charming son he pretended to be. Rough day, Mom? You look tired, he said gently, too gently. Alyssa rubbed my back, all sugary concern. We were thinking we could take a little hiking trip this weekend, get some fresh air, clear our heads. I nodded slowly, the lies sliding effortlessly from my mouth. That sounds wonderful. They exchanged a quick glance, satisfied, and I walked away before they could see the look in my eyes. I packed my backpack that night, but not with hiking gear. I packed rope, a knife, and 2 sealed protein bars, their favorite flavor. I knew which trail they would choose. Mason always liked secluded places with no cell signal. He probably thought it would be easy, a push, a scream, an accident. But this wasn't going to be the story he had written. The morning of the hike, the sun was bright and uncomfortably warm. I climbed into the passenger seat of Mason's car without a word, letting them chatter cheerfully like nothing was wrong. They joked about the trail, the view, the weather. I smiled and nodded like I wasn't counting every mile between us and civilization. When we finally arrived at the state park, my breath caught. Sable Ridge, infamous for its cliffs and mysterious disappearances. We hiked for nearly an hour before Mason suggested we rest near a scenic overlook. He handed me a drink, something labeled electrolytes, but I knew better. I brought it to my lips, tilted the bottle, and let just enough touch my tongue to make it look real. Then I lowered it slowly, pretending to feel refreshed. You two should eat something, I said sweetly, pulling out the protein bars from my backpack. They devoured them without hesitation. I waited 5 minutes, 10, their steps began to falter. Their voices slurred, balance failing. Alyssa blinked slowly, trying to stay upright. Mason staggered, clutching at a tree. And just before they collapsed, I let myself fall too softly, gently, as if I had fainted from exhaustion. They were out cold within minutes, sprawled in the underbrush like rag dolls. I stood up slowly, brushed the dirt from my pants, and checked their pulses still alive. I retrieved the wrappers from the protein bars and tucked them back into my bag. The same sedatives they had planned to use on me were now working their way through their systems. I didn't say a word, I just walked away. As I descended the trail, I hummed softly to myself. The wind rustled through the trees, whispering like an old friend. I didn't know if they would wake up before dark or if the wild animals would find them first. I no longer cared. Let them taste what it means to be powerless. Let them learn what survival feels like when no one's left to save you. But fate wasn't quite finished with me yet. Halfway down the mountain, I heard a weak voice cry out from the trees. I followed the sound and found a man about my age lying beside a fallen log, leg twisted at an unnatural angle. "Can you call for help?" he whispered. I didn't hesitate. I dialed emergency services and stayed with him until the ambulance arrived. At the hospital, while I waited in the corridor, a nurse finally approached me. "He's going to be okay," she said with a reassuring smile. "His name's Leonard Grant." My heart paused. I knew that name. Leonard Grant, the executive director of Grant Company, the very firm Mason had been trying for months to secure investment from. Leonard didn't recognize me, but his gratitude was sincere. "You saved my life," he said, voice weak but warm. "If there's ever anything you need, anything at all, just ask." I shook my head politely. I just did what anyone would have done. But inside, something cold and quiet whispered, "Mason, you've just lost the game." I never told Leonard who I was or who my son was. I didn't need to. Some truths are more powerful when left unspoken, waiting quietly in the background until the right moment. He gave me his business card before he was discharged, hand trembling but eyes sharp. "Please stay in touch," he said gently. "I'd really like to see you again." I slipped the card into my purse and left without looking back. Back home, the house was strangely silent. For once, it felt like mine again, though I knew the silence wouldn't last. I had only bought myself time. By nightfall, Mason and Alyssa still hadn't returned or even called. I didn't sleep, I just waited. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time. The call came early the next morning. We found them, the park ranger said, alive, but barely. I didn't ask for details. I took my time getting to the hospital. When I finally walked into their room, they were pale, haggard, curled up in hospital beds like broken children. Mason lifted his head first. "Mom, where did you go?" he asked, his voice hollow. I blinked slowly, masking everything behind a tired smile. "I'm not sure," I said. "I just remember waking up in a hospital bed. I rolled up my pant leg, revealing a neatly wrapped ankle brace. Doctor says it's a mild sprain." Alyssa's eyes darted toward Mason, suspicion flaring behind the fatigue. We passed out," she whispered. "It doesn't make sense." Mason frowned, clearly trying to piece things together. "Did you?" he started, but I raised a hand, interrupting him with a look of gentle hurt. "Why would I ever do something like that?" I said softly. "I love you both." Neither of them spoke after that. I stayed quiet too, letting the awkward tension boil slowly inside the room. Elisa, never one to sit in discomfort for too long, returned to form quickly. "I'm craving lobster," she announced the next day. "Tomorrow I want a ballon soup. I need to nourish my body." I didn't argue. I didn't remind her of her condition, or rather, the lie of it. I simply smiled, nodded, and cooked everything she asked for. But I made sure to include a rich chicken soup with every meal, packed with sodium, fat, and enough butter to cloud her thoughts. They slurped it down happily, unaware. Every bite made me calmer. When the hospital finally discharged them, I helped them home like the devoted mother they expected me to be. Mason tried returning to work the next day, but something unexpected happened. At the company entrance, security blocked him. "You've been removed from the system," the guard said, expressionless. Mason stood there stunned, texting, calling, until someone finally responded. "Your services are no longer required," the email said. He came home dazed and collapsed onto the sofa. I looked over from the kitchen, pretending to be surprised. "Rough day?" I asked. "You seem upset." Mason rubbed his face, his hands shaking slightly. "They fired me," he muttered. "I don't understand." I walked over and gently patted his head. "Don't worry," I said sweetly. "I have money. I'll take care of you both." He looked up, startled, and I watched the flicker of hope flash through his eyes. "In fact," I added, "why don't I send you two on a vacation? Clear your heads." Alyssa jumped up, eyes sparkling. "That sounds perfect. We deserve a break." I booked them a week-long trip to Thailand luxury hotel, private car service, spa treatments. I didn't use a dime of my own money. I simply rerouted everything through Mason's dormant business credit line, quietly reactivated with his forged signature. Each time he asked for more funds on the trip, I smiled and transferred. If it's not enough, I wrote, "Just let me know." They spent like royalty, completely unaware that they were bankrupting themselves. While they basked in sunshine, I began cleaning house literally. I hired movers to box up every last item that belonged to them. Clothes, shoes, devices, junk, every bit of it to local shelters or thrift stores. Anything expensive was sent to charities. I changed the locks the night before their return and left not a trace of their existence. The moment they landed, I sent them a digital invoice. Every meal, every massage, every luxury item was logged and labeled. Borrower Mason Hart, the document read. A few hours later, my phone rang. Mason's voice was shaking with fury. What the hell is this? The money you spent, I said calmly, is yours to repay. There was a pause, then a roar. I'm your son, he shouted. Isn't it normal for me to use your money? I chuckled softly, no longer even pretending. Funny, you still remember I'm your mother, but tell me, Mason, have you ever said I love you to me without needing something? Within an hour, the doorbell rang, then the pounding started. Mason's fist slammed into the wood. Mom, open the damn door, he yelled. Alyssa's shrill voice followed. Is this your way of cutting ties with your own son? What kind of mother does this? I walked to the door and opened it just enough to block their entrance with my body. What do you think you're doing? I asked coolly. Mason tried to force his way in, but I stood firm. This isn't your house, his face twisted with rage. You gave it to us. Alyssa pushed forward, eyes blazing. We let you stay here out of kindness? I laughed cold, cruel, and controlled. Then I tossed a folder into Mason's chest. Take a look. I said, whose name is on the deed? Mason flipped through the pages, his face draining of color. Alyssa snatched it from him, eyes narrowing. This is fake, she hissed. You were in such a rush to claim your inheritance. I said, you never read the last line. Her eyes scanned down. For display purposes only, not a legally binding document. She looked up, horrified. You tricked us. You tricked yourselves, I said. Mason lunged, shoving me back. I'm your son, he screamed. I steadied myself, walked over to the cabinet, and pulled out one more envelope. You're not, I said coldly, not by blood. His face went blank as I handed him the final truth. This is a paternity test, I explained. Your biological mother was the woman who broke up my marriage. Your father got her pregnant, then vanished. I took you in, raised you, gave you a name, a home, a future. Mason dropped to his knees, shaking. No, you're lying. I crouched down beside him and whispered, I gave everything to you. And all you ever did was take. Now pay back what you owe and leave my house. I turned to Alyssa, voice like ice. Oh, and about that little drink on the mountain. I never touched it. Her lips parted, stunned. You two were the ones who took your own medicine. I just gave it back to you. Then I shut the door and locked it. Outside, their screams grew weaker, and I finally felt nothing. I stood on the other side of the door, unmoved by the chaos erupting outside. Mason was shouting, Alyssa was crying, but their voices sounded distant, like an old radio turned down low. I walked to the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. It was the first time in years that the house felt still mine and mine alone. No one barking orders, no one draining me, no one manipulating my love, just me breathing. An hour passed, maybe two, before the pounding on the door finally stopped. I peeked through the peephole and saw them collapsed on the front steps, faces pale, breath ragged. Elisa's skin had taken on a grayish hue, and Mason was slumped over, eyes barely open. I didn't hesitate, I called 911. There are 2 people unconscious on my porch, I told the dispatcher calmly. They've been under severe stress and may be dehydrated. The paramedics arrived within minutes, sirens wailing through the quiet neighborhood. I stood off to the side as they loaded Mason and Alyssa onto stretchers, answering every question with deliberate concern. They've been struggling lately, I said softly. Family tension, poor eating, emotional breakdown. I wasn't lying, not exactly. Later that evening, I visited the hospital not to comfort them, but to witness the aftermath. A young doctor pulled me aside and explained their condition. Physically, they're weak, he said. Years of stress, poor diet, and a sudden crash in adrenaline. I nodded slowly, sipping the coffee he offered. Do you think they'll recover? I asked. It's hard to say, he replied. But this level of depletion doesn't bounce back overnight. I stepped into the room quietly and looked at the 2 of them, my former abusers, now pale and powerless in hospital gowns. Mason stirred slightly and his lips moved. Mom, I'm sorry, he whispered, voice thin and cracked. I didn't speak at first. I just looked at him. The man who once threw soup in my face, who plotted my death, who sold my love for a payout. You're right, I said quietly. You should be sorry for being a thankless parasite. I turned and walked out before he could say anything else. Nurses rushed past me as monitors started beeping rapidly behind me. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just walked down the hallway like a woman finally released from a prison she had built with her own hands. And outside, the sun was setting. A few days later, my phone rang. Leonard's name lit up the screen. For a moment, I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to hear from him, but because I'd forgotten what it felt like to want anything for myself. "Where are you?" he asked. "I'm coming to pick you up." When his car pulled up in front of my house, I stepped outside into the fresh air like I hadn't in years. He didn't speak right away. Just opened the door, and I slid into the passenger seat. We drove without music, without small talk, and somehow it was the most peaceful silence I'd ever experienced. Leonard never asked about Mason or Alyssa. He didn't probe into what happened at the mountain or at the hospital. All he said was, "You look lighter," as we sat in a small-town cafe drinking black coffee. I nodded, unable to find the words for the relief that was blooming inside me. The weight was gone, the kind that clings to your ribs and presses against your lungs for years. "I think I'm finally learning how to breathe again," I whispered. Over the next few weeks, Leonard became a steady presence in my life. He wasn't loud, didn't make grand gestures, never tried to fix me. He simply showed up, took me to farmers markets, held my hand at book clubs, helped me build an herb garden in the backyard. We cooked together, we sat on the porch and watched the light change from gold to blue in the evenings without saying much. I redecorated the house slowly, stripping away everything that reminded me of the life I had built for someone else. Gone were the beige walls, the old family photos, the gifts I never asked for. I bought myself floral curtains, new cushions, a cozy reading chair. I painted the kitchen yellow. For the first time, I wasn't arranging life around other people's needs. I was creating a home for myself, a home I could finally live in. One afternoon, a small package arrived at my door with no return address. Inside were internal company documents, high-level personnel changes at Grant Company. Mason's name had been erased from every project, every position. No explanation, no appeal, just gone. I didn't have to ask who sent it. Leonard never mentioned it, and I never brought it up. But that night, he made dinner and poured me a glass of wine, and I knew some justice is better delivered in silence. "Thank you," I said quietly as we cleaned the dishes side by side. He just smiled and handed me a towel. And I realized that real love doesn't always speak loudly, it just shows up and stays. I hadn't thought much about Mason and Alyssa since the hospital, but one morning I received a message, an automated alert that their bankruptcy filing had gone public. Overdrawn accounts, maxed out credit lines, multiple collection agencies, all under Mason's name. Every penny they thought they were entitled to had become their responsibility. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply acknowledged the truth. Life had returned what they gave. And karma, when it finally came, didn't knock it, let itself in. I had no need to chase revenge anymore. They were living in it. The final message came 2 months later, just after I trimmed the lavender in my garden. Mason had sent a single text. "Please help us. We have nowhere to go." I stared at the screen for a long time, not with anger, but with the kind of stillness that only comes after surviving a hurricane. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. A week after that, I saw them by accident at a strip mall off the freeway. They looked unrecognizable. Mason's hair was shaggy, clothes wrinkled, eyes sunken. Alyssa wore oversized sunglasses and limped slightly, her arm hooked around his like they were holding each other up, just to stay standing. They didn't see me. And I didn't call out. I returned home and made myself a cup of tea. The house smelled like rosemary and fresh bread. Outside, the wind was soft and forgiving. I sat by the window and thought of Goofy, and for the first time, the memory didn't hurt, it warmed. That little dog had seen me through the worst of life. Leonard arrived later that afternoon with 2 fresh-baked scones and a book he thought I'd enjoy. "Still spoiling me?" I teased as I let him in. He chuckled and shrugged. "It's not spoiling if you deserve it." We sat on the back porch, the sun dipping low behind the garden wall. I reached for his hand, not out of need, but out of choice. "I think I'm finally free," I said, breaking the silence, not from them, from who I used to be. He nodded, eyes steady and kind. "You stopped living for people who never asked how you were doing." I thought about that for a moment, then smiled. I didn't even realize how heavy I'd been until I let it go. The next morning, I donated the last of Mason's unopened mail to the recycling bin. Bills, warnings, final notices. I didn't read them. They weren't mine to carry anymore. I had returned every debt, every favor, every illusion. And now I owed no one a thing. I joined a local art center and started learning pottery. At first, my hands trembled over the clay, too used to scrubbing dishes and folding laundry. But eventually the clay softened, and so did I. Leonard and I began going on weekend drives to towns we'd never heard of, picking up fresh peaches and listening to old jazz. We didn't talk about the past much. It felt like a story I had already closed the book on. Now we talked about small things, recipes, birds, the way clouds move like old dancers across the sky. One night, as we were clearing the dinner table, he paused, watching me for a moment. "You think you'll ever fall in love again?" he asked. his voice low, almost unsure. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the man who never tried to steal anything from me, not my peace, not my space, not my worth. Maybe I already have, I said quietly. He smiled, but didn't say a word. That's what I liked about Leonard. He never needed to make anything bigger than it was. Later that week, another package arrived, this one from Leonard. Inside was a photo frame with a single snapshot, the two of us at the farmer's market, holding coffee, laughing. I hadn't realized someone had taken it. Beneath the photo, he'd written, in his neat, quiet handwriting, "Your story isn't over. It just started late." I placed the frame on the mantle next to a candle and a small ceramic paw print I'd saved from Goofy's last vet visit. A few weeks later, a letter came from a charity organization, one I'd donated Mason's luxury furniture to. They sent a thank you card with photos of the refurbished shelter rooms. "Your donation helped us rebuild a home for 6 struggling families," the note read. I pressed the card to my chest and closed my eyes. It felt like something full circle had just happened, and for once, I could smile about it. That Sunday, Leonard and I took a walk through the park. Children were laughing. Leaves were falling. Nothing in that moment was perfect, and that made it even more beautiful. "Do you miss anything?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "No, I think I have everything I need now." At home, I brewed chamomile tea and opened the window above the sink. The breeze smelled like late summer and freedom. I set 2 cups on the table and we sat in silence, sipping. Outside, the wind moved the chimes softly. I no longer heard chaos in the quiet. I heard peace. Years ago, I thought motherhood was supposed to be unconditional servitude, that if I gave enough, endured enough, forgave enough, love would eventually grow. But some people take that love and bury it under greed and entitlement. And when they do, it's not your job to keep digging. It's your job to walk away, to choose yourself. I didn't hate Mason or Alyssa. I pitied them. Because in the end, they destroyed the only bridge that would have saved them. They'll never know the version of me that was soft, giving, endlessly forgiving. And now they never will again. I don't need revenge to feel complete, just peace. The last chapter of my life isn't full of grand triumphs or riches. It's a slow, quiet bloom. A morning spent baking without stress. A book read without interruption. A hand held without fear. And in all of that, I found more joy than I ever thought possible. So no, I'm not bitter, I'm free. And that freedom is worth more than any inheritance, house, or insurance policy. I am a Hart. I was once used, betrayed, and broken, but now I am whole. For most of my life, I believed that love, especially a mother's love, was enough to fix anything. I gave, forgave, and sacrificed, thinking that if I just held on a little longer, my son would finally see my worth. But what I learned painfully and clearly is this: love means nothing to someone who only sees you as a resource. The biggest lesson I've taken from all of this is simple but life-changing. Never pour yourself out for people who wouldn't lift a finger if you were drowning. You can be kind and generous, but you must also be wise and strong. Stop mistaking manipulation for love. Stop waiting for people to change while they slowly destroy you. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not heartless for walking away from those who abuse your loyalty. Sometimes the greatest act of love you can show is to yourself. I thought I was building a family, but what I really built was a prison. Now I've torn down those walls. And if you're listening to this right now, I want you to know it's never too late to reclaim your life. You deserve better, but first you have to believe it.